Now, the subject you've given me is the three farm bills and the impact on food security. First of all, they are no longer bills, they are laws. They were pushed through parliament by throwing out members in the Rajya Sabha, and then the president found time on a Sunday to sign his assent to these bills, which are now acts of parliament. They are laws. Now, I want, and of course, after this happened, you saw very major protests across the country. Uh, it is not true that the protests were only in Punjab and Haryana. That is not true. There were many states where protests took place. Some are still continuing. There was picketing in several districts in Tamil Nadu, major conflagrations across Karnataka. But I want to draw your attention the role of the media in this and how the government has used the media against the farmers. It's very interesting how many things happened on September 25 when the farmers went out to protest against these new laws. On that day, on 25th September, to divert attention from the farmers' protest, the Election Commission of India holds a press conference declaring the dates for the Bihar election. The dates for the Bihar election were decided earlier. They could have been declared 5 days earlier. They could have been declared a day after the protest. No, they held so that the news cycle would be diverted. They held the Bihar Election Commission press conference on the 25th at the time the farmers were on the streets. Second, on 25th of September, the Narcotics Control Bureau summoned another 6-7 film stars in Mumbai. Deepika Padukone was stuck in Goa airport, but 30 media cars or whatever followed her to the airport. Karishma Prakash was summoned to the Narcotics Bureau, where there were more journalists and TV crews than you will ever see in one place. All these measures were meant to give the media some other thing to do than cover the farmers' protest. This is very important. Yet, and this is equally interesting, when I looked at Twitter that day, I asked my colleagues, I'm not an expert on this, I asked my colleagues to help me. On that day, from 9 hours or more, of the 10 top Twitter trends, the top 4, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, were farmers' protests. Between 9 p.m. and 6:30 p.m., more than 500,000 people, mostly middle class, went up there and overwhelmingly registered their support of and sympathy for the farmers. That was so heartening. Despite television focusing on Riya Chakraborty, Sushant Singh Rajput, Deepika Padukone, and despite TV channels spending hours on the election commission dates and Bihar elections, despite all this, farmers protest. 4 out of the top 10 trending tweets were farmer protests. The only time the media focused on the farmer issue for 10 minutes unbroken that day was when Narendra Modi came to denounce all the protesters. When he came to say these opposition parties, they are crooks, they are criminals, they are they're telling you lies, they are misleading you. That was the only time the media gave a little space, the so-called national media, gave some space for farmers' protests. Now, about, but it's significant, this Twitter trend, because farmers don't have paid Twitter accounts. Farmers don't have paid armies of trolls who will do whatever they're told from the morning onwards. Farmers don't have that. And yet, 500,000 Indians put up tweets supporting, mostly supporting the farmers. That was one interesting thing. Paid trolls and paid armies of, of Twitter accounts, we saw a few days later, 1 week later, and it tells you what kind of India we are living in. On October 2nd, Gandhi's birthday, Mahatma Gandhi's birth anniversary, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., the leading tweet was Nathuram Godse Zindabad, celebrating and praising Nathuram Godse. That was the leading trend. The first two trends on Twitter were in praise of Nathuram Godse. You know who organized those tweets. Farmers don't have such armies. So 500,000 tweets coming in their name, as against 85,000 tweets in praise of Nathuram Godse. I think that was a very interesting phenomenon. Now, about the laws. There are three. And I'll look at each one of them, but one will take more time than the others. The main one of these laws, the main law, is called Farmers Produce, Trade and Commerce, Promotion and Facilitation Act. Ordinary human beings call it APMC Act, the new APMC Act. APMC is Agriculture Produce Marketing Committee. And they organize the market, the mandi, all these things across the country. The government's case was essentially, and please note that every major channel and newspaper supported the laws. Times of India wrote editorials. Economic Times wrote editorials. The Indian Express wrote editorials. The Hindustan Times wrote editorials. Some of them said, this way of browbeating people in parliament, that's not good, but the laws are very good. And we should persuade farmers too. The laws are very good. Okay. What is so very good about the laws? Here, I pause to tell you, don't look at these laws or the labor laws that have come after them as something new, novel idea. These are the kind of policies we have followed in this country from 1991 onwards. Please notice. Second, I am very pleased to see the Congress party opposing these laws. I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased to see Mr. P. Chidambaram of Tamil Nadu writing columns in the Indian Express criticizing these laws. Very nice. But the same Mr. Chidambaram and his party had the same proposals on their manifesto in 2019, repeal of the APMC Act, withdrawal of that. Then they say, oh, no, we wanted to create farmers markets. So anyway, the point is that this is a continuation. It is a continuation of your neoliberal economic reforms. And it is based on a very simple ideological principle, which they will try selling you in every sector, not just agriculture. And that principle, ideological principle, is free market is freedom, state support is slavery. What have the farmers asked for? They've asked for assured price, they've asked for stability, they have asked that a government elected on by promising, they voted for on the promise of MSP, assured price stability, is now doing something else, the opposite. So they are being told, no, you must go to free market, volatility of prices, the fluctuation of prices, all this is much better for you because the state is not going to support or subsidize you much longer. That they did not say, but they implied. The argument that the government and the media are making, one, this liberates the peasantry from the APMC. Two, now the farmer can go and sell anywhere he likes. And he can get a good price anywhere. Three, he has freedom to choose. And it is based on the assumption. These claims are based on a complete falsehood assumption that APMC is some great monopoly. And this monopoly is having farmers in its clutches. And farmers are prisoners and slaves of the APMC. Whereas if they are liberated from here, private trade will look after them. Ambani, Adani will all come and offer much higher price. Now, firstly, why is this a complete lie? Even Mr. Chidambaram admits the nonsense in this claim in his recent column. The idea that the APMC and the Mandi have some monopoly over farmers' produce is complete nonsense. The bulk, you can look at the data from the National Sample Survey, and farmers, those of you listening who are farmers, you don't need to look at any data. You know that the bulk of your produce doesn't even reach the APMC. It is sold at the farm gate to the Sahukar, the money lender, the Taragar, your commission agent, the other creditors, Vyapar, traders. This is whom the produce goes to. The National Sample Survey data show us that 65% of paddy, 58% of wheat are anyway sold outside the APMC. And even in the APMC, private traders come for bidding at the auctions that take place in and around the APMC. So it is not that you are breaking a monopoly, you are in fact breaking something that is supporting the farmer and restoring the traders and private businessmen's monopoly. And now you are inviting a corporate monopoly to come and take over this and saying that you will get better prices. One interesting thing about these three bills, nowhere do they mention the word MSP. But the Prime Minister is going on saying, they're all telling lies. I am here to see that you get your MSP. I will guarantee your MSP. I will double farmers' incomes by 2022. If so, why did you not say that in the bills? Why did you not guarantee in the bills? Why did you keep the word MSP out completely? Now here, see, those in the audience who are farmers know how many of them are able to access MSP. In Punjab and Haryana, they're able to access it much more because rice and wheat being the main crops, and huge monopoly of, I mean, there's a huge majority of those crops. So more MSP goes there and therefore they are going to fight and defend it. But here I want to explain something to my middle class friends, to those who don't know what an APMC is. I want to give you an analogy from your own lives that explains what the APMC is, what the APMC does. Am I saying that the APMC is some sort of heaven? No. Am I saying that the APMC has no problems? Oh, no. I'm saying the APMCs have serious problems. We need to reform them. We need to give more control to the farmer over these APMCs. All this is true, but you will best understand when I give you examples which affect you, who are those who are not farmers. Let me give you the example of government schools. Okay, government schools. Tamil Nadu government schools are better than in many other states. That is a fact. They are better than in many other states. But we all know the problems of government schools. They are underfunded, government deliberate neglect. There will be many teachers' appointments that are not made. There are many teachers across many schools, thousands of schools in the Hindi belt, which have no toilets for girls and some which have no toilets at all. All these are problems. And yet, if there were no government schools, tens of millions of children, Indian children, will not be able to go to school. If there were no government schools, tens of millions of Indian children will not be able to get that one decent midday meal. So if we close government schools because they are functioning not as they should, see the damage you will cause to tens and millions of Indian children. I'm trying to say the government schools are the APMCs of the education sector. The PHCs, the primary health center and the district hospitals, they are the APMCs of the health sector. All of you have had trouble with district hospitals or PHCs. You know these well. Should we shut them down because they are problematic? Or should we sincerely invest in them? See that they work because they are the only option poor people have to healthcare. This is a country where 55 million people fell below the poverty line in 1 year, in 12 months, according to the studies done by the Population Health, by the People's Health Foundation of India. You know, one of the founders is Amartya Sen. They say that in 1 year, 55 million Indians fell below poverty line solely because of health expenditures. I have been to 900 households where farmers have committed suicide. In many cases, the greatest expenditure was on health expenditure. 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs for surgery, for hospitalization, somebody's mother, somebody's child. 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs. Where did they get the money from? Borrowed, sahukar, interest on the loan. The health, the PHCs, district hospital, are the APMCs of the health sector. The government schools are the APMCs of the education sector. Likewise, the APMCs of the agriculture sector, they are flawed, they are problematic, but if you undermine them in favor of the corporate sector, then you are going to deny the millions of farmers who are able to access MSP. You are going to deny them that, where the Indian farmer is being forced to sell the crop It is not in APMC. While you and I are having this discussion now, at this moment, there are farmers in Kalahandi in Odisha who have pledged not only this year's crop, but the crop of 2023 to the Sahukar, to the Taragar. They have already lost control of the crop 3 years from now. This also happens at a lesser extent, even in the southern states, even in Tamil Nadu. You will find that in Ramnad district, chili farmers of Ramnad have pledged their crop to their Taragar, who is also their creditor, who is also their money lender, this year's crop and even next year's crop. So they are not able to access the MSP because they are trapped in debt. They are trapped by private traders. They are not slaves of the APMC. It will be the Taragar who gets the price or the benefit or that. The point should be to break private monopolies and let farmers gain more control over the markets. Now, the second of the laws that has been brought is the Essential Commodities Amendment Act. There was already an Essential Commodities Act. There was already an APMC Act from 1969. Why did these acts come? Why were these acts introduced? Remember the late 60s, early 70s were periods of great peasant struggles. There were periods of very huge peasant protests and fights. The APMC came to try and moderate the monopoly of private traders. Today, you are breaking it down and saying it is to benefit the farmer, that which was created for the farmer. The Essential Commodities Act came because of terrible consequences from hoarding and from black marketing. Now, even in those days, the black marketers and hoarders, they were terrible people, but they never had the capacity to hoard on the scale that the corporations have. The corporates have huge capacities to hoard so much of your product. They can do two things. They can hoard and store the product, depress the price of the farmer, but raise the price in the market. And who benefits? Not the farmer. Any peasant in the world, in any country in the world, will tell you one piece of wisdom, which is common across peasantry, across people in Vyavasayam, anywhere in the planet. They will tell you, when the produce is in the hands of the farmer, the price falls. When the produce goes to the hands of the trader, the price rises. Any farmer in Tamil Nadu, in every village, will tell you that. They don't have to be advised by experts and economists about this. They know this. Now the Essential Commodities Act, essentially they are saying none of these commodities are essential anymore. There is no cap, no limit. Big business, corporations, anybody can store as much as they want. And the only time we will take action declaring these as essential commodities, they have removed a number of commodities from the list, but they are saying we will introduce and act with the Essential Commodities Act only under extraordinary circumstances like war and famine. Then they will act on essential commodities. And also, they will act when the retail price rises 100% above what it is. So suppose 1 kilogram of some dal costs 150 rupees today. Yeah. When it is more than double, then they will act. Then it is essential commodity. Or under war and famine. This makes a complete farce, a total farce of the purpose for which you had this. You are legalizing hoarding, legalizing black marketing, and saying this is for the benefit of the farmer. Now he has more choice. Now, the Essential Commodities Act never applied to the farmer. Farmer could stockpile if there was no limit on the farmer stockpiling, because 85% of your farmers are very small people. What will they stockpile? How much will they stockpile? Where will they stock? Where will they hold? Hmm. The limitations were on orders and black marketers. Today we have removed by law. We have said it's okay. You can hold as much as you like. You can store as much as you like. So farmer's price will go down, market price will go up to the benefit not of the farmer or laborer, but to the benefit of the corporates who will now engage in stockpiling and hoarding. The third of these laws has a long, hypocritical, and meaningless name, but it is essentially about contract farming. Again, it acts as if this is something terribly new. But anyway, the name of this, official name of this law is Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement of Price Assurance and Farm Services Act. Essentially, this is about contracts between farmer and big business, farmer and trader, farmer and corporate. Firstly, and it talks a lot about written contracts. The wonderful thing is, the law that is all about written contracts does not anywhere make writing mandatory. It does not require that the contract is written. Okay? It does not require that the contract is written. It says may be written, desirable, could be, if you choose voluntary. It does not say the contract has to be in writing by law. Second, it does not say that the government will be a third party signatory to the contract. The government is not guaranteeing your contract. Third, it takes away the power of the farmer to fight the contract violation. Suppose you are farmer Ponnusamy from Pudukkottai and I am Reliance or PepsiCo or Godrej. You and I have a contract, even if it is a written contract. Section 19 of this law takes this law outside the jurisdiction of civil courts. Section 19 takes this law outside the jurisdiction of civil courts. So you have to go into some very big battles to be able to reach other courts where you can say that Sainath has cheated me, PepsiCo, Reliance have cheated me. For how will you fight? Firstly, let us acknowledge that 95% of contracts in India in agriculture are tenancy contracts which are not written. Your grandfather knew my grandfather. Your family knows how to control my family. You give me 2 acres without any document. I don't even have the right to get bank loans because I don't have a patta. I don't get any government schemes or credit because I can't show that I am the farmer here. I have no. In Telangana, the chief minister has declared there is no such thing as a tenant. I don't recognize tenants in Telangana. There are only farmers. So how does this contract thing can work? There have been many contracts. You can have very, very good contracts if the farmers are organized, if farmers are united, if there is collective bargaining power, like in sometimes there is in states like Kerala, if there is very strong collective bargaining power, yeah, you can do contracts. You can also do community contracts. You can take on for whole building complexes, for whole societies. You can do those things. But contract with multinational companies or Indian multinationals, what is your power? I have a written contract with you. I violate it. What will you do? I don't have to do anything to bankrupt you. You try fighting me, your own vakil will bankrupt you. Your own lawyer will bankrupt you. 2 hearings. What is your earning? I don't even have, my vakil doesn't even have to, I don't even have to get my vakil to go for more than 2 hearings. So that is the strength of my power, corporate power against the small farmer. Let me give you an example from Punjab. A multinational corporation comes and tells Sardar Santa Singh, you give me so many 100 quintals of tomatoes and I will give you 3 lakhs a year. 3 lakh rupees per season or per year, whatever. Then I will also tell you, here are the seeds for these. I want only this kind of tomato. My tomato might be from Brazil or Mexico. I say, no, I am a global company. I use the same ingredients, the same tomatoes to make my sauce, PepsiCo or whoever. I give you the inputs. First time I give you free, like they did for vanilla farmers in Kerala in 2002, 2003. Now I give you this and you are very happy because you have got your input cost free, the main seed cost. But when you grow those tomatoes, you cannot sell them anywhere else. They have no local market. If I violate the contract, you take that to market in Amritsar. Punjabis don't eat that tomato. So you can only sell to me. Then I suddenly say, Sardarji, global prices of tomato have fallen. I can't give you 3 lakhs. I will give you 1,40,000. Now, your options are what? You can go to fight contract in the disputes tribunal. Disputes tribunal may put fine of 10,000 rupees on me. I don't care. What is 10,000 rupees? 5,000 rupees for a major corporation. You take your tomatoes and try selling them on the market. You can't sell. Nobody wants that variety of tomato. It is not what people eat in Punjab. You try suing me in a court, your vakil will bankrupt you. You cannot afford to fight. These are the sort of bargaining structures that are being legalized and legitimized in this law, where you are permanently in an inferior bargaining position. I'm saying again, you can have contracts where the bargaining power, the object of a contract should be to give supremacy to the interest of the poor farmer. This contract law gives supremacy to the corporate power. So these 3 laws together, what are they going to do to your food security? What are they going to do to your income? When you get low prices for the farmer and high prices in the market, many people don't understand 70 plus, more than 70% of Indian farmers are so small, they buy food grain on the market. So more than 70% of Indian farmers, they are so small, they are not able to, they buy their food grain on the market because they have parted with the food grain that they have grown for other expenditures, for repayment of loan, for repayment of credit. So these three laws will institutionalize the inequalities in our society. And I ask you to understand that the three laws are consistent with what has come from 91 onwards. They are an extreme step forward. Please know that immediately after the passing of these three laws, when the opposition was humiliated and had to boycott parliament, they passed another three laws affecting labor, removing the power of trade unions, making it impossible for unions to function in factories, making it very difficult for a union to get recognition inside a factory, inside a workplace. So there are laws brought to tame the farmer, laws brought to crush the labor. For whom is this being done, if not for corporate power? Now, I made a suggestion to Mr. Modi. After the controversy broke, when the farmers took to the streets, Modi ji has said 100 times, I am guaranteeing MSP. Never mind, it's not there in any of the three laws. I am guaranteeing MSP. I have always stood for the farmer. I have always been with the farmer. And I have said that I'm the only person who has ever said I will double farmers' incomes by 2022. And I found one more interesting thing. In 2011, when Mr. Modi was chairman of the National Working Group on Consumer Affairs, he submitted a report as chairman to Prime Minister, and you can find the report even now on the ministry, on the website of the Ministry of Consumer Affairs. And one clause of the recommendations says, clause B3, B for Bombay, 3. It says, no transaction between farmer and trader should be allowed at below the MSP price. No transaction between Vyapar and Vyavasayam should be allowed below the MSP price. All of us support that point. So I say, I say to Modi ji, you in 2014 promised to implement the recommendation of the Swaminathan Commission. And look at the credibility of this government. In 2014, they said, within 12 months of coming to power, we promised to implement the recommendation of the Swaminathan Commission of MSP equal to comprehensive cost of production plus 50%. Cost of production plus 50%. We will implement this within 12 months of coming to power. Millions of farmers voted for Mr. Modi. What did they do within 12 months? They submitted an affidavit to Supreme Court of India saying, this cannot be done. It will distort market prices. They were worried about the market, not about the farmer. We cannot distort market prices. But you put that in your promise to the farmer. 2016, Agriculture Minister Radha Mohan Singh said, no, we never made such a promise, even though it wasn't right. 2017, they said, forget Swaminathan. Look at Madhya Pradesh, Shivraj Singh Chauhan. What a wonderful model of agriculture, where the subsidies were going to the trader, not to the farmer. And while they were boasting about this, police fired on protesting farmers in Mandsaur in Madhya Pradesh, killing 5 farmers. 2018 and 19, Mr. Arun Jaitley turned all these arguments on their head in his budget speech. You can check paragraph 13 and 14, where he claims we have already implemented Swaminathan Commission in the Rabi season. Now in the Kharif season, we will implement again. And in 2020, the current Agriculture Minister, Narendra Tomar, says in the parliament debate, we are the only party respecting the Swaminathan Commission. So 6 years, 6 positions. But if these are your positions, then I say to Mr. Modi, why you passed 3 bills with so much violence and vehemence in parliament? You threw 8 MPs out of parliament house, out of the parliament. And what? Why don't I? And you rammed through these 3 bills. I am suggesting one more little law, 5 paragraphs, 4 paragraphs and conclusion, which all based on your assurance. Since you have said 20 times after the bill, I guarantee MSP. So why don't we have a bill with 4 elements? Number 1, central government will guarantee MSP as per Swaminathan formula, which the BJP promised in 2014 and farmers voted for. Second element, like you said in your 2011 report, no transaction between farmer and trader shall be below MSP. Third element, guaranteed procurement. Otherwise, all the state governments will play games. The governments will play games. They will declare very high MSP. They will say, okay, cotton, 6,500 rupees per quintal. But they will not procure. They will not buy from the farmer. And therefore, the farmer will be forced to sell in private trade. So third element, guaranteed procurement. And fourth element, Prime Minister, sir, you are saying you will guarantee doubling of farmers' income by 2022. That is not even 20 months from now. Not even 20 months from now. How can you guarantee anybody's income to double, whether by 2022 or by 2032 or by 2042, when those people are drowning in debt? So the fourth element is cancellation of farmer and laborer debt. 100% cancellation of the debt, which was also promise of loan waiver that you made in 2014. So whatever you have said, I am putting down 4 paragraphs, 5 paragraphs. You pass that law. Every single MP in the parliament, and which party will oppose it? Which party will oppose it? Now for the writer, now let him answer that. For the writers and artists of Tamil Nadu and for the farmers of Tamil Nadu who are here today, I say 2 things. I think it is the duty of the writers, the journalists and artists to highlight what is the greatest problem of India, what is growing and deepening every day, which is, in one word, inequality. And these laws are deepening and entrenching the inequality. No nation in the world has not only such deep inequalities, but so many inequalities. Inequalities of caste, inequalities of class, inequalities of gender, inequalities of region. These have deepened under the neoliberal economic reforms. And you are seeing the kind of what inequality means. whether in the Hathras gang rape case, whether in the wealth of individuals in a country where 121 billionaires have wealth equal to 22% of GDP. Hmm. I want writers and artists. See, the great literature, great journalism, great art have one thing in common. The greatest of literature, the greatest of journalism, the greatest of artists engage with the great processes of our time. The journalist called Bhagat Singh, yes, he was a journalist, a professional journalist. The writer called Khwaja Ahmad Abbas. The writer, poet, artist called Rabindranath Tagore. What made them great? They focused on the great events of their time: anti-imperialism, fighting capitalism, fighting colonialism, fighting for social reform. These made these writers, artists, poets great. I want to tell the farmers that it is not for me to inspire and tell you what to do. You inspire me. I am saying it is something amazing that in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of the lockdown, lakhs of farmers came on the streets in this country to still protest at risk to themselves, at risk to their families. They still came out and said, "We are not your slaves." These protests, like I said, the policies are not new. The protests are also not new, though they are more difficult. Since 2018, this phase of protest by farmers has been inspiring to the people in the middle classes like me. In 2018 March, 40,000 of the poorest farmers of Maharashtra, amongst the poorest Indian farmers, marched 182 kilometers from Nashik to Mumbai in 40 degrees heat, barefoot, because they cannot afford chappals or shoes. They started in Nashik, 2,000 people at a bus stop. By the time they left the city, there were 15,000. By the time they reached Mumbai, there were 40,000. And 10,000 people from the middle classes joined their protest. It was so inspiring that 6 months later, farmers from 21 states and 4 union territories, many of them, several people from Tamil Nadu, marched to Parliament in Delhi to protest against the wrong policies of the government towards farmers. I am saying that every time we think they are defeated, you have struck back. You have come back and you have shown us. I say that we have to fight, among other things, for a special session of Parliament dedicated entirely to the agrarian crisis and related issues like privatization of water, which is their plan, like climate change, which is a very serious issue that progressives are not giving attention to, and that makes me very sad that so many of my progressive friends don't take the problem of climate change seriously, though it is affecting agriculture very badly already. I am saying a special session of Parliament, and on that day, on that session, we must have 10 lakh farmers out surrounding Parliament to see that they pass the laws that you have demanded on MSP, on cancellation of debt, all those demands that you have made. You will lead the way, we will follow. Those demands must include, they have to be in the framework of justice. All struggles from here have to be in the framework of justice, whether social justice, economic justice, gender justice. Remember that our constitutions, preamble, and our directive principles are woven around the theme of justice. That is what we need to fight for. And you would have to fight, progressives will have to fight. You cannot solve your agrarian crisis by only addressing these three laws. You cannot solve the agrarian crisis only through one or two acts. You have, I believe that you cannot solve our crisis if we do not, for instance, address the issues of women farmers, of Dalit farmers, of Adivasi farmers. Women do 60 to 65% of the labor in agriculture, but we don't recognize them as farmers. They are farmers' wives or farmers' sisters of farm. This is nonsense. They do millions of hours of unpaid work across the country every day. Huh? So we we have to address these in the framework of justice. And I have not stopped being inspired by the struggles of the farmers in this country, which have really taken a new level after 2018. And it astonished me when so many farmers, despite all the problems, despite all the media diversion, came out and protested. I think that our fight, our struggles must be in the framework of justice. And those 40,000 poorest farmers showed us what we can still achieve. Thank you.